Hello Janesville, welcome to Park Place Views, the monthly show where we talk about what's going on in your city government, the city of Janesville, Wisconsin's Park Place. I'm Maggie Darr, Management Information Specialist with the city. On last month's episode of Park Place Views, I sat down with City Assessor Jeff Mulver and we learned all about the property assessment process. If you missed that episode and are interested in viewing it, you can find that and all past episodes of Park Place Views on JATV's YouTube channel or on the city's website under the Publications and Videos page. And today's guest is City Clerk Treasurer Dave Godek. We're going to talk about the upcoming major election as well as other things going on in the City Clerk Treasurer's office. You may remember Dave from the 2015 episode of Park Place Views. He has a bachelor's degree in political science and psychology from Bradley University. He has a master's in accounting from UW-Whitewater. Before coming to the city of Janesville, he worked in the private sector as an auditor at Whipfly, and he was hired by the city in 2007 as Deputy Clerk Treasurer and was promoted to City Clerk Treasurer in June of 2015. So thanks to Dave for being here. Welcome, Dave. Thank you for being back on the program.
Hi, Maggie. Thanks for having me.
Great. So Dave, you've led the City Clerk Treasurer's office since June of 2015. How big is your staff in that office?
We have, including myself, a staff of 10.
Okay.
We have 8 full-time employees and 2 part-time employees.
Okay, pretty large staff down there, and there's a lot of things going on. We're going to talk about some of that today. I want to spend a lot of our time today talking about the November election because it's a pretty big deal. I feel like we've been hearing about this election almost nonstop for the last year. I'm kind of ready for it to be over, to be quite honest with you. What do you expect voter turnout to be for the November election?
Well, we're figuring that voter turnout will be around 70-75%. We just did our ballot order to order ballots for the election, and we ordered 41,000 ballots to ensure that we have enough ballots for anybody who wants to vote, who's eligible to vote.
Wow, that is a very high number when you look at past elections and turnout. Do you think that this is going to be the busiest election of your career here at the City of Janesville?
I think it'll be right up there with probably the 2008 election, and there seems to be a lot of interest in the community. Hearing a lot about the election, obviously, as we get closer to it. We're starting to get contacts from the political parties about what our plans are for the elections. So I do expect we're going to be quite busy.
Great. And so November by far will be the busiest election this year, but it's important to remember we've had 3 other elections in 2016. We had a February election, an April, and an August election. That's a lot of elections in one year for your staff. What is the impact of elections on your staff?
Well, for our voters and our citizens, elections come up and there's election day and everything's done. And at the end of the day, unofficial results are announced. We pretty much know who the winners are. They very rarely change. But the work isn't done for us. There's still the balancing of the elections, making sure that we record the people who did vote into the system, and making our reports to both the state and the federal governments of items that we need to report to them. How many poll workers we had, what their ages are. Was it difficult to find poll workers? How many people voted? What our turnout was? How many absentee ballots we had? So there's a lot of work that goes in after the election, but then prior to the election, there's a lot of planning and setting up and making sure we do things like order enough ballots and have absentee ballots ready to go and issue absentee ballots. So any one election takes a minimum of 4 weeks, 2 weeks on either side, to get all of the work done that we're required to do under the state statutes. The November election, just because of the numbers, it's going to be even more than that. You know, we've already started the work for the November election, even though we're 6 weeks out. That work's just going to increase as we get closer to election day, and then it will continue through November and December because of the sheer volume.
Wow. And you talked a little bit about absentee ballots. What impact does absentee voting have on your office?
Well, people can vote in-person absentee, and through the August election, that was limited to the 2 weeks before the election. There was a recent ruling by a federal court judge in Madison that eliminated that 2-week restriction. And so now absentee voting is going to be opened up for an even wider window. But for each absentee ballot that comes in, there's a process we have to follow. We have to have a staff member that issues the ballot. We have to then record that the ballot was returned. We have to secure that ballot. Then we have to send it to our centralized absentee ballot counting location for multiple poll workers to process that ballot through. So in terms of dollars, a regular ballot might cost about $1 to walk through the process. If somebody comes in and votes at the polling place on election day, the actual cost of that is probably $1. An absentee ballot costs about $3 to walk through that same process.
That's significantly different. Have you seen an increase in the number of absentee ballots?
Yes, absentee ballots have increased every year since I started in 2007. And I'm figuring in November we're going to have a minimum of 10,000 absentee ballots for that election, which will be somewhere between 30 and 40% of the total ballots cast.
Wow, that's a large percentage. You mentioned that the window for voting by absentee ballot is increasing during this election. When can people vote by absentee ballot?
Our expectation is that we will have ballots in our office on September 22nd. Absentee balloting will begin in our office on September 26th, which is a Monday. We'll start at 7:30 a.m. They can vote in my office from 7:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. from September 26th through November 4th. The exceptions to that will be on October 26th and November 2nd. We are going to extend our hours to 7:30 p.m. So residents who can't get to our office during normal office hours can come in and vote absentee if they choose to. And also we will have absentee balloting available on Saturday, October 29th from 9 a.m. until noon for, again, to try and accommodate individuals that can't get to our office during normal business hours.
Okay, great. Plenty of opportunities, and I'm sure the city will be putting out more information about those dates if you didn't have a chance to write them down at home. So one thing that you alluded to was that the counting of absentee ballots is done centralized, and I think that that's a pretty new development as of the August election. Can you talk about what changed in that process and why?
Sure. Historically, prior to the August election, when someone would vote absentee, whether it be by mail or in person at our office, we would get the ballots, we'd separate the ballots by ward, we would alphabetize the ballots, we would seal the ballots up, and then we would have people take those ballots to the polling place where that ward is housed. So for example, Ward 10 is down at Edison Middle School. So any ballots for Ward 10 would be separately housed, sealed, and sent to Edison Middle School, and then 2 poll workers would process each absentee ballot, just like anybody who walks into the polling place. They would get a tally slip number, they would have to put the ballot through the machine, and they would, in effect, interrupt the people who were there to vote on election day because they had to get into line and go through the same process. With the increase in absentee ballots, it not only put a lot of pressure on our poll workers to try and get those processed throughout the day, it also interrupted the voters that were coming in and slowed the process down for them. So over the summer, we looked at what we could do to change that, and one of the things that we were able to do is create a centralized absentee ballot counting facility. And the City Council passed an ordinance that allowed for that. So now what happens with an absentee ballot is the ballots are still separated by ward, they're still put in alphabetical order, and instead of going to the individual polling places, they go up to room 416 at City Hall, and we've got about 10 poll workers in August that processed all the ballots for the entire city for absentees. What this did was it allowed the voters that came into the polling place to not be interrupted. It also took pressure off of the poll workers to take 2 poll workers to stop helping voters who were there to vote or register and put them back into working with the voters who were there as opposed to processing absentee ballots. We did that in August so we could kind of have a practice run before November so that we could see what worked in the process, what we needed to improve in the process, how we could tweak things so that it'd be more efficient when we're facing 10,000 ballots as opposed to 1,500, which is what we got in November. Overall, it went very well. I was very pleased with how the process worked. Our poll workers that did the absentee ballot processing did a very nice job. They had some really good ideas on how they could improve their efficiency for November. And again, just because of sheer volume, instead of having 10 people working in the centralized count facility, we're probably going to have 22, 23 people working in that centralized count facility in November.
Wow. Well, it sounds like a good improvement, and I'm glad the poll workers get a chance too to find additional ways to improve the process. So it should be good in November. So if we have any first-time voters at home watching that want to get registered to vote, how can they go about doing that?
Well, there's a couple ways that they can register to vote right now. The first is they can just come down to our office and they can fill out the voter registration form, and we'll make sure that it's filled out completely and correctly and we have all the information that we need. The second is that we're in the open period, so they can mail their registration form in. They need to include proof of residence with that mailing. Proof of residence documents include things like your driver's license, a utility bill that's less than 90 days old, those types of items. And we'll get that registration process. They can also go on to My Vote Wisconsin, which is a website where they can fill all the information in, print that form off, and then they still need to mail it to us with the proof of residence. And the nice thing about registering now is if there's a problem, we can correct it before Election Day. If the voter forgets to, for example, sign the registration form, we'll contact them and let them know, hey, we need this form signed, we're going to send it back to you.
Sure, okay. So now, voter ID law. It's on again, it's off again, it's on again. What is the current status of the voter ID law? Do people need to bring their ID to the polls on November 8th?
The short answer is yes.
Okay.
The longer, more complex answer is when the legislature first passed the voter ID law, it was challenged in court, and through that process, voter ID was stayed. There was no requirement to do that. The courts would not allow us to enforce that law. It worked through that process to where both the Wisconsin Supreme Court and the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals in Chicago, on a state and a federal level, said that the voter ID law was both constitutional on a state level and on a federal level. And so we've had voter ID implemented now since the February election this year. In July, Judge Edelman in Milwaukee issued a ruling saying that voters could sign an affidavit saying that they were unable to get voter ID. The state appealed that ruling to the Seventh Circuit, which enjoined it and said, no, that's not in effect. So right now we are still in effect with voter ID law, and it's the limited forms of voter ID that are allowed. And you can find those on My Vote Wisconsin and at GAB, the Government Accountability Board website, which is now the Wisconsin Elections Commission, but it's still gab.wi.gov is still their website. They don't have the new site up yet. And that shows the exhaustive list of voter IDs. The most common voter IDs that we see are driver's license or state ID cards, and those can be expired if they're expired on or after November 4th, 2014. You can also use a passport. And then we also see veterans ID cards are an acceptable form of voter ID. Those are the big four that we see. There are other forms of voter ID that you can use. They're not seen as often. A receipt from the DMV that you're getting your license but you haven't received it yet, that works for photo ID also. But I would encourage anybody that has a question to call our office and we can walk them through that, and we would happily help them to make sure they have the proper photo ID. And I think the key is your photo ID proves who you are. So the address on, say, your driver's license doesn't have to match where you live. That's still a legitimate photo ID.
Okay.
Because you're proving who you are. So the process for the voter, you need to come in. You should hopefully have your ID ready because the poll worker's going to look at it. They're going to, make sure your picture on your ID resembles you, and then they will issue you your tally slip so you can get your ballot.
Cool. Okay, great. Good information there. So some other very important information for people who are going to vote is, where do I vote and what's going to be on the ballot? Where can voters find that information?
Where do I vote and what's going to be on the ballot? Again, My Vote Wisconsin is a great tool. You can put your name in and it will tell you all kinds of stuff like where you vote. It'll show you a sample ballot. It'll show you who your current elected officials are. You can also, if you're not connected to the internet, you can call us. I mean, the big thing, obviously, that we're voting for in November is president. But there's also a U.S. Senate race, congressional race, state assembly races. We have countywide races for registrar of deeds, county clerk, and county treasurer on the ballot. District attorney is also on the ballot. So there are many races down ballot besides the presidential race.
Right. It's good to get informed about what's going to be on there in advance and know when you walk in who you're going to vote for. So I know we talked a little bit about the city's poll workers, and that has been recently a popular topic of conversation. So can you just tell us a little bit more about what poll workers do on Election Day?
Sure. Poll workers run the polling place on Election Day. There's a chief election inspector that's in charge of the polling place that assigns the poll workers the various jobs that they do. And really the jobs fall into a few different categories. There's individuals that register, people who want to register on Election Day. They help walk them through the form. They check the form, make sure all the information that's on the form is there that we need to have, that the form's been signed. Then there are people at the poll books, and these are the books where you go and you announce your name and you show them your photo ID, and they issue you a number saying that you have voted. They also hand you a tally slip number that you take that slip to the next table where people hand out ballots. So the ballot is received by the voter then goes and votes. You then put the ballot into the DS200, which is the tabulating machine which counts the vote. There's a poll worker that sits there, because if there's a problem with your ballot, if the machine rejects your ballot, that poll worker can help to explain to the voter why their ballot wasn't counted by the machine. We also have poll workers that are available to assist voters if they need help. If someone has trouble seeing, we do have a machine that can be used to help people who are visually impaired to vote independently, but sometimes they don't want to use that machine, so poll workers can assist them in marking their ballot the way they want it marked. If someone's physically unable to walk into the polling place, they can do what's called a curbside vote, where two election inspectors will come out, get all their information, bring a ballot out for them to mark, and then walk it back into the polling place to process through the machine. So there's various items that poll workers do throughout the day. They start their day by setting up the machines in the polling or the voting booths and putting up all the legally required signage that has to go up. At the end of the day, they kind of do it in reverse and take all that stuff down. They secure the ballots. They make sure that write-in votes are identified and properly recorded. It's a very interesting, unique, and challenging job.
Yeah, I bet it's quite a whirlwind that day, especially during these busy elections. So I know your office has recently been recruiting more poll workers in anticipation of the November election, but also for future elections. How have you been recruiting people, and has it been successful?
Yeah, it became apparent to me that we needed more poll workers, and so we have really gone on a blitz to recruit them. And some of the things that we've done is we've had actual current poll workers go to the senior center here in town to recruit people. I went out to UW Rock for their freshman orientation day to recruit college students there. We've also done press releases and items on our website. We've asked poll workers to recruit people, friends. We've had some articles in the Gazette that they've done saying that we need poll workers. And we're reaching out to various service groups throughout the community in an effort to see if we can find folks to come in and work the polls for us. And really the results have been incredibly successful. At the April election, we had 189 people in our database of folks who have said, contact me to be a poll worker. And as of this morning, we are now up to 288 people on that list. So we're up 99 people, and we have had a few that have dropped off since April, but that's the net increase in the number that we've had.
Yeah, that's awesome. So if any of our viewers at home are interested in becoming poll workers or know someone who might be interested in becoming a poll worker for the city, how can they sign up to be involved?
Well, again, they can go to the city's website and they can use our volunteer form on the website to say they want to be a poll worker and fill that out, and we'll get them all taken care of. For those that don't use the internet or aren't comfortable with that, they can call our office and volunteer, and we'll gather the information that we need and put them on the list.
Great, wonderful. So that's all the questions I have today about elections. And viewers at home, if you have more questions about the upcoming election or anything about elections, you can visit the city's website at www.ci.janesville.wi.us/vote. Or you can go to the Wisconsin MyVote website, which is myvote.wi.gov. Lots of good information there. You can always contact the city clerk treasurer's office as well. But Dave, after the November election, your office really turns its attention to property tax billing. What's the timeline for setting property taxes and distributing those bills to property owners?
Sure. Statutorily, we have to have tax bills out by December 15th. That's our deadline. We try very hard to beat that deadline by a couple of weeks. We try and get it out the first week of December or so. One of the items that we face is that we create the tax bills, but we have to wait for all the varying taxing jurisdictions to set their levies so that we can produce those bills. In Janesville, we have not just the city that we put on the tax bill, but the county, the school district, and Black Hawk Tech. And Janesville's a little unique for a large city because we have a portion of the city that's in the Milton School District and the rest of the city that's in the Janesville School District. So we're basically waiting for 5 different entities to adopt their budgets and set their rates before we can process tax bills. Typically, we don't see those until the end of November. Then we work very diligently to get those out, and we send out about 26,000 tax bills total to both homeowners and property and business owners. So there's a lot of work that goes behind that, and a lot of waiting on our end as we work to get the information from the various taxing jurisdictions. Looking at the calendar this year, because of the way everything falls, I expect that we will have all that information by November 30th, which is Tuesday, and expect to have tax bills out of our office and into the mail stream the following Monday, which would be December 7th. That's our goal right now, assuming that nothing goes awry.
Sure. So really no rest for the wicked. You guys just wrap up the election and start getting out those property tax bills.
Well, we won't have the election wrapped up at that point,
Yeah,
but we'll still be working on that wrap up at the same time.
Right, right. Keep busy. So another thing that your office oversees is licensing for a variety of different purposes: business licenses, alcohol licenses, pet licenses. I understand that the pet license rates went up in 2016. Can you just talk a little bit about what the new rate is, and why do we require that people license their dogs and cats?
Sure. We require the licensing of dogs and cats for two reasons. One is state statute requires dogs to be licensed. It is a way, in order to get a license, you have to show proof of rabies vaccination, and the state requires that we license dogs for that. Consistent with what a lot of communities do, we also license cats because they can get out, they could be affected by rabies. We want to make sure that those cats have also had rabies shots. And so, again, we license cats. So that's one reason. The other reason is those license fees pay for animal control activities, or part of animal control activities. They don't cover all of the animal control activities that the city does. But we have to somehow have a mechanism to fund when the police go out to pick up a stray and take them to the Humane Society to be housed until the owner comes and gets them. Sometimes the owner doesn't get them at all. And so that's how we fund that program, or a part of that program. So those fees were raised in 2016. There's a difference between an altered animal and an unaltered animal. By that I mean if your animal is spayed or neutered, you pay a lower rate. That lower rate is $10 for an altered animal, $15 for unaltered. There is a fee if you are late licensing your animal. The license period goes from January 1st through December 31st each year, and each year you have to license your animal. And anybody that licenses their animal after March 31st has to pay a $10 late fee. And that's not a late fee that the city just imposes. Again, that's required by state statute, so we don't have the ability to waive that fee. There is an exception if you get your animal, obviously, in June. You didn't need to license it prior to that. As long as you license it within 30 days of getting the animal, then you don't have to pay that late fee.
Okay, interesting. So another process that the city handles is open records requests. And I know that there's recently been a change in how the city manages our open records requests, and now they're centralized through your office. First, how many open records requests would you say that the city receives in an average month?
That's a difficult question, because if you include the police department open records, it explodes. Mm-hmm. So excluding those, we probably receive about 10, 15 a month. Including those, that number goes up to about 1,000 a month.
Yeah.
But those requests are a lot of times from attorneys that want information on police reports for an accident, or if there was an individual who was arrested. So we kind of exclude those. The police department has an entire records department that focuses on that stuff. So when I talk about our records requests for the city, it's exclusive of what the police department does, because their stuff is very detailed. It oftentimes deals with crimes or accidents, and so they have a whole area dedicated to that. So I'd say on average the city receives about 10 to 15 a month.
Okay. And what kind of records are releasable under the state's open records law. What can people request?
People can basically request any record that the city has. There are limited exceptions in the law of things that we can't release. One obvious example is if someone requested a list of social security numbers. That's protected information. We're not going to release that. But another example is a water bill. If a water bill is in my name, then the only person that can access that water bill is me. Nobody else can access my water bill. It is protected by state statute and says it's not open to public records request or release. However, if somebody wants to get a copy of my tax bill, they can, because that's not protected. So there are just two examples. And really, we release any records that we have that aren't excludable. And it's a very small list of things that we don't release because there are very narrow exceptions in the law.
Sure, okay. So if someone is interested in getting their hands on some public records, how can they go about submitting an open records request?
Well, again, on our website, you can go to the I want to, and on that drop down it shows request a public record, and what they need to do is determine, is it a police record or a non-police record, because there's two different places to search there. If they request a police record, a police report, then that'll go right to the police department and they'll process that through their normal process. If it's a non-police record, that request will come to our office, and then we look at the request and say, okay, we know that it affects this department or this office or perhaps multiple offices, and we'll forward it to the record custodian there and ask them to get the records together, send them back to us, and then we release them to the requester.
Okay, great. So last year in 2015, the city began accepting online bill payments for utility bills. Has that been a system that you find people are really taking advantage of?
People are taking advantage of that system. We're seeing probably 10 to 15 transactions a day going through our website, which isn't a huge number, but is pretty significant as far as what it could have been. And so I think as more people become aware of the fact that they can pay their bill online using their credit card, there'll be more use of it. And we have seen that usage trend up since we've gone live with that system.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll expect it to continue to increase. And so then earlier this year, the city began putting information about utility bills online. What kind of information can people access about their utility accounts, and where do they find that?
Sure. As part of our eGov suite, which again you can find on the city's website, you can do searches of your property to find information about your water bill. It'll show you the current balance. You can see the last 3 quarters of usage. The thing is, on the eGov site, you have to have a login to do that because those water bills are protected information. So we can't just put them out there for anybody to see. So you create a login, and our system has a validity check to make sure that the name that you're using matches the property record name or matches the tenant name, because tenants are also able to access that information. And so it checks it against the utility records and the property records to make sure that you're either the owner of the property or you are the renter of the property, and then you're able to access that information.
Okay, that's a good new tool for people at home. So Dave, we're just about out of time here today. We covered a lot, but I think we only covered a portion of all of the exciting stuff that goes on in your very busy office every day. If viewers at home want to get more information, how can they contact you?
They can certainly call our office, 608-755-3070, and we can give them the information that they need. We're always happy to have citizens come down to our office. We're on the second floor, or the lobby floor of City Hall, and it's right through the main doors on the right-hand side, and they can contact us via the website.
Great, okay. So do you have any last thoughts that you want to share with the viewers before we sign out with you today?
I just want to let the viewers know that, you know, the folks in the clerk treasurer's office work really hard, the whole staff, to try and accomplish our goals. And some of our big goals go back to the election, and it's making sure that everybody who wants to vote, who's eligible to vote, is able to vote and have their vote be counted. And so we really encourage people, if you've got questions or concerns, to contact us so that we can work through those and make sure that they're able to vote like that. And I would remind everybody on Election Day to thank a poll worker, because what they do is they work really, really hard, and they haven't necessarily created or supported the laws that they have to enforce, but they are the enforcers of those laws. They're not the ones that decided you have to show your photo ID to vote, but they're required to see that photo ID. And so be nice to them, thank them for their service to our community, because it would be impossible to have an election without them.
Great, good ending words. Well, thanks, Dave, for being on the program today, and maybe we'll see you again next year.
All right, thanks, Maggie. Have a great day.
And thank you, viewers, for tuning into Park Place Views today. Be sure to tune in next month, where we'll be talking to the city's IT director, Gordy LaChance. We're going to learn a little bit about the IT division for the city, but then we're going to focus mostly on talking about cybersecurity, that invisible but very real threat that can affect every one of us, and how you can protect yourself. And in addition to tuning into Park Place Views, you can stay connected to the city in a variety of ways. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Sign up to receive our email blasts that go out weekly with press releases and notices about upcoming programs and service changes. And sign up to receive Nixle alerts from the Janesville Police Department. For Park Place Views and the City of Janesville, I'm Maggie Darr. Thanks for tuning in.